I just wanted to, I was at the Paris Climate Conference where we got the Paris Climate Agreement with press credentials. So I sat in the front row day after day. 2015. Terria was there too, but I don't think she had the press pass. So I sat in the front row of these press conferences, and Christiana Figueres was like the still center of the storm. All the world leaders were there. I saw Obama, Netanyahu, and Putin double and stuff. And she just was holding it all together. As I've said to her since, if you could get 192 countries to agree on what pizza to order, it would be a miracle. But she got 192 countries to make a huge climate for the future of the earth. It's a huge ecological and economic commitment. And I really just thought she's a super high-powered hero of mine that I will, never see again. And then she showed up through Roshi, because you never know what will happen when Roshi's involved. And but she can't be here because grandchild being born. And so a few days ago, I wrote to her after I listened to the video that it's not that she's not at this workshop as a teacher, it's that her grandchild is with us at this workshop as a teacher. I wrote, a person who will be 76 in 2100 has so much to teach us simply by giving us this sense of time and future, maybe with the lesson that birth can be hard, unpredictable, dangerous, and nevertheless miraculous. Though I wish your daughter an easy delivery. So it's not that you're not there, dearest Christiana, it's that you in the future are showing up in yet another way. You've always taken care of the future. Now it's arriving, not as the 8 billion of us you've done so much for, but as one tiny person. And I'm always struck by how babies remind us that being human does not necessarily mean having political opinions and possessions and responsibilities, that human beings can also weigh 8 pounds and have a century before them, and all the words for hope, love, fear, power yet to be learned.
Hello, friends. I am sorry not to be joining you in Upaya these days. I have just arrived in California and settled into my grandmother nook, just a few steps away from the apartment where my daughter will soon birth a baby boy, my first grandchild. Yes, there are many details still to be tended to. Rearrange the living room furniture to make it more cozy for mom and baby. Organize the healthy foods for mom's important first 40 days after birth. Set up the changing table at the right height and stock it with onesies and diapers and coconut oil. All delightful tasks. Now, I have always thought that being a grandmother was going to be sheer, uncomplicated bliss. As a mother, I took on frontline responsibilities of feeding, clothing, educating, protecting from danger. As a grandmother, I was preparing for only cuddling, loving, and telling wonderful bedtime stories. I could not have imagined bedtime stories. I could not have imagined that as we as a family focused on the final preparations of a loving home birth, we would be so harshly confronted with the deeply painful question of what kind of a world is this blessed little boy coming into? I will say that my first reaction to that question was one of acute concern about the messages of hate, discrimination, recrimination, and confrontation that are currently reverberating so loudly they seem to have taken over all public communication channels. Do we as a family need to cocoon into our own little world in order to protect this tender, newly arrived being? Or as adults, do we all need to completely disengage in order to keep the terrors at bay? For half a minute, my answer was yes, and I did. Until I realized that seclusion only leads to weakness. So, what are the options? With gratitude, I remembered a lesson offered to me many years ago by our dear Roshi Joan, Robai Shin, or grandmother's heart. Originating with Eihei Dogen, the 13th century Japanese Zen master, Robai Shin is the term that describes a heart of great compassion and equanimity, the capacity to maintain balance and inner calm in the midst of all conditions, no matter what those external circumstances are. Interestingly, Robai Shin calls upon us to cultivate an inner, balanced, mindful response to circumstances of both joy and misery. I smile at myself as I realize that in my preparations for November 2024, I was so ready for the joys of grandmotherhood and so unprepared for the challenges of an even more turbulent world. Could it be that I am being invited to extend my grandmother's heart well beyond the boundaries of my grandchild's crib, out to the larger world, which is also crying? As though this were a completely novel concept, suddenly I am stunned by the realization that I cannot have a grandmother's heart only for my own grandson, or even only for those with whom I agree on a particular set of values and principles, those inside my bubble who have also been so painfully surprised in recent days. It is easy to love my kindred spirits personally if I know them, or even impersonally if I have never met them. But Robai Shin summons me to also love those whose actions I cannot condone. Robai Shin challenges me to radically suspend judgment, and oh, how difficult that is for me. With humility, I'm facing the fact that I relate to others through my personal beliefs, preferences, biases, and expectations. I have long thought of myself as a person not only open to differences, but actively celebrating the differences among us. Today, I realize that actually my openness operates only as long as the differences are within or consistent with my value system. When I encounter a radically different value system, I quickly draw up the bridge which surrounds my mental castle, happily justifying myself and leaving many in the moat. With even more humility, I realize that I am now being called upon to lower the drawbridge, to cultivate an attitude of invitation, of empathy, patience, and understanding, creating a more conducive environment for the deep listening which will be necessary. In this journey, and a journey it is, I am aided by understanding impermanence, the incontrovertible fact that everything in life is subject to change and flux. Of course, the temptation is to think that impermanence will eventually bring about different external circumstances. That's true, but it is not the whole truth. And restricting myself to that part of the truth puts me into a passive role of no growth for myself. In this case, the more challenging part of impermanence is the realization that my mind is not fixed. It can be cultivated. I can cultivate it. With intentionality, I am capable of molding my foundational mindset. For years, I have known that the delicious title of mother is not attained merely by physically having a child, but by tending to that child or other children with unconditional love, especially when there are disagreements. Today, I have learned that the magnificent title of grandmother is not reached by merely loving my daughter's child, but by extending that loving kindness and unconditional love to all beings, impartially, without judgment or discrimination. At 68 years of age, I thought the hard work was over, that in elderhood I could relax into enjoyment. I was only partially right. Alongside the unfathomable joy of grandmotherhood, feeling, thinking, and acting in true coherence with Robai Shin is the toughest life challenge yet. And, my friends, the one that awaits all of us who feel the call to till the ground for future generations.
So I have the, Noah, am I on? You. All right. So I have the dubious distinction, or should I say the honor, of opening space for a time of harvesting. And we as Roshi loves to say, want to go to essence. There are lots of people, and we really want to hear not only from the in-person community, but also the online community. So we're here together sharing this space, and it's great to see you guys. Yay. Hi. So what's alive for you? What's alive? What is alive? Is there anything else that we should be asking? And we've got raised hands online.
And on-site.
Okay, so let's start with online. Wendy, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, we have
Iris,
thank you.
you're unmuted.
Thank you. Well, I am just filled with gratitude, deep gratitude, and the timeliness of these teachings are perfect. Having had a difficult meeting this last week in my Sangha's climate action group that I facilitate, and where someone just let loose with all sorts of expletives at how she hates people. She used, the F word because other people were expressing compassion for some of the work they did on the ground in Pennsylvania, speaking with Trump voters and Harris voters. And so to hear all of you really speak to the essence of how we need to continue to have open hearts with compassion and respect for everyone, and figure out how to dig deep within ourselves to bring that forth so that we can understand each other and communicate better and move our world forward. So thank you so much to all of you for your wonderful, important, and profound teachings.
Thank you. Thank you for being here and for your practice with the Sangha. It all matters.
May I say something? I think one of the things that we have to hold as well is the sense of the experience of the lack of agency, of the loss of control that is creating such anger in people's lives. I mean, I learned about it working on death row maximum security. It was like an anger machine. Everything was structured, everything was dictated, everything was designed to belittle. And here were these kind of powerful but profoundly socially disadvantaged males who had killed people and who had just nothing but naked rage. And one could feel intimidated by that rage. But as I was working in there for 6 years as a volunteer, 3 or 4 times a week down Highway 14, and what I discovered was that that rage was really coming from helplessness. And once I understood anger as sourced in a sense of helplessness, my own anger began to transform. But certainly my sense of compassion, which was not sappy compassion, but it was compassion really based on seeing deeply the suffering of individuals who had harmed others in ways that are unimaginable for some of us to even hear about. It's just so horrendous, the stories that I heard. And then to sit sometimes on the concrete floor of a pod, talking and hearing from the man on the other side of that steel door with just the food port open, and watching through that kind of listening, knowing the crime that he had committed, which was like Terry Clark, raping little girls in southern New Mexico and then strangling them. You know, just nightmarish crimes. And to sense into the utter experience of naked helplessness. It was such a wake-up call. And what I feel in hearing and bearing witness to so much anger on one side of the equation, but also on the other side of the equation. It's not to say that our anger is righteous on this side of the equation, and on the other side of the equation, so to speak, that is unrighteous anger. It's being able to drop beneath that anger and to understand the psychosocial factors that give rise to the sense of powerlessness in our society. And it is not to be sappy about it. But that's what Roshi Joan means. You know, grandmother's heart means, it's not like, oh, like this. Grandmother's heart, she's nobody. She's the tea lady, the lady on the side of the road in Tang Dynasty, China, selling tea and rice cakes with no name, but she's awake because she has been abandoned by her husband. She's been abandoned by her children. She has no purchase in society. She's in a world where, from the point of view of gender parity, it does not exist. She has no power whatsoever, but to the power of her lived experience, which has given her the courage to uphold herself on the side of the road, nameless, selling tea and rice cakes to Zen masters whom she trounces, so to speak, with her absolute Simter-like wisdom. But it is Simter-like in the sense of compassion, cutting right to what is real. And what is real in the case of anger, from my experience of working, not only in the prison system, but with dying people, in families of dying people, where the loss of control of the body in the dying process can give rise to immense anger, or the imminent loss of a loved one and not being able to control the lifespan of a person you love, where anger arises. So I think one of the things that is important about the work that we do in terms of awakened action is to understand both sides of the equation of anger and what is common between both sides.
Thank you, Roshi. So do we have a question from, please?
I've traveled here to this retreat in part to ask a Dharma question I've been sitting with for 13 months now. We are in day 410 of the genocide of the Palestinian people, and I for the past 5 years or 3 years or so have been involved with a Soto Zen community that was very sprung into action for Ukraine, and then was silent about Gaza. And so for years I've sat listening to Dharma talks, as they say, Zen is not a self-improvement project. If you're just here to, get less anxious, like that's the smallest way of approaching this practice. And so oh great, now my tears are on the screen. Thank you, moderator.
Thanks a lot, Noah. No pressure.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Zen is not a self-improvement project, which I understood to mean that we sit in order to expand our capacity to show up to respond to the world's deep need. And when I asked why they spoke up about Ukraine but wouldn't speak up or organize or call for a ceasefire, I was told Zen was not a world improvement project.
Oh, that's just hogwash, right?
I mean, this was
No,
the
I know,
senior teacher.
I know.
Like, and so, and then I was met with a lot of like white fragility and like just a lot of excuses and a lot of they said, oh well, we're Buddhist, so we're already against war, so we don't need to say, blah blah blah. So I left that community yet. Haven't found another one. But so I'm here to be like, what the fuck? Where does the truth lie within that, in a thing like that? Thank you.
What I loved about Bernie, he said it's just these sanghas in a certain way are just clubs. So, so that's, one piece. But the other piece is that the level of harm, of violence, of absolute cruelty is so great that for many it's hard to hold. And I want to call out, Natalie, I don't know if you're still here, Aviv Tatarsky, who spoke, in one of our Dharma talks, who is an Israeli working in this very, very field of the Palestinian world as someone aiding Palestinians. I think it is amoral, from my point of view, not immoral, amoral, not to speak out about the genocide in Palestine. Period. That's just my opinion. It might not be held by every Buddhist, but Bhikkhu Bodhi and I have been corresponding about this very issue, as you probably have read some of what he has been writing, and also the various things that we've been signing about this very, very profound, confusing, tangled, and violent issue that is also completely tangled in Israel. There are enormous protests in Israel by Jews against what's happening in Palestine. That Western Buddhists are taking an amoral stance in relation to the genocide of Palestine, for me, is horrendous. Whether genocide is happening, and Rebecca and I are very aware of what happened and is continuing to happen in Myanmar, a lesser-known genocide, where Rebecca and I were working, along Wendy was also there, with Rohingya refugees living in shanties, having fled, to Bangladesh, making their way through India, sneaking into Nepal, living in hovels with nothing. Or what's happening in Sudan. 32 wars and genocides are happening on this planet right now. I think of the Berrigan brothers, I think of Dr. King, I think of Gandhi, I think of Ambedkar, I think of Sulak, I think of Mahagosananda, Joanna Macy. Voices like Ty's calling, as Ty did in the mid-1960s when I first met him, to end the violence now. That's just my opinion. It doesn't necessarily represent, perhaps, the opinions of everybody in this community. But I have to say, as the abbot and as an 82-year-old, as someone who was born during a war that was all about exclusion and violence. That is the Second World War, and the effects on my father and how he died and how the war crawled out of him in his last days. War is stupid. It is just utterly stupid. It is an utter waste on every level that we can imagine. And I feel that we have to stand strongly in this position, even though it is one that puts, a religious organization such as ours in jeopardy to actually raise a voice in relation to Gaza or to Ukraine or to Sudan or to what's happening in Myanmar. The Berrigan brothers, Joanna, King, Tai, Sulak, Ari, all of these socially engaged Buddhists have raised their voice, and I'm so grateful that Bhikkhu Bodhi and I stand aligned and public in relation to our views vis-a-vis Gaza.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Roshi, for that heartfelt and so deeply inspiring and courageous, really, rightfully so, position. And forgive me, I didn't get your name.
Rainer.
Rainer? Yeah, so I'm wondering, by a show of hands of people here and maybe people online, how many can relate to Rainer's feelings of the sense of being isolated and not being understood?
Yeah.
How many people can relate to that feeling? Raise your hand high. And Rainer, look around. We got you.
Am I mic'd? I just want to say, I'm sorry that your integrity has cost you in your Sangha, has caused you suffering, but deep bow and respect for your integrity, and you have that intact, and, good for you on that front. I left a Buddhist group that wouldn't divest from fossil fuels, and it is really frustrating to find out when they won't walk their talk. So, thank you.
Thank you. So shall we turn to an online question? Wendy?
Sure. Karen? You're unmuted.
First, profound thank you for this time. And you asked what brought us alive, what was alive for us. And Roshi Joan just answered a deep part of what has been a question and anguish. But what's really been alive for me has been Terry's returning me to story, and the incredibly powerful story of the fourth and fifth flood, and somehow finding a way in community after preceding with the story of family, because I live in a family that's divided also, and it's been a place of practice to try to find my way, and I've mostly fallen down. But I also, it's the reclaiming and being reminded that I'm a storyteller, because I was an oncology nurse in my working years, and the only thing important about people seemed to be their stories as life became unwoven and then rewoven. And to be in the midst of story seemed real and the only essential thing. And then as I've come more deeply into practice and become so aware of my own need to dismantle and many of my own stories, the stories of my own making, the breaking of stories. It's been confusing. And so I've just stayed with the confusion, but it was so enlivening to be returned to the essence of story. So I give you thanks for that.
Karen, I just wanted to thank you, first of all. Thank you for what you did for families and patients as an oncology nurse. I still remember my mother's oncology nurse. Her name was Faye Harner, and she took care of all of us. And when my mother was trying to protect her children and her husband, all of us as a family, she could cry to Faye. She could vent her frustration, her anger. And she was a holy woman, and she knew how to school us in receiving our mother's death. The doctors didn't know. It was Faye. And I just want to thank you for your life's work and for the practice that is yours.
Thank you so much, Karen. So shall we turn to this side of the room? Do we have a... Okay, great.
Roshi, I still remember, I don't know the date, but we were sitting in the Sky Mine Hall down in Costa Rica, and you were telling the story of Grandmother's Heart. And it was, I'm trying to keep myself together here, it was 3 weeks before the birth of my 3 favorite grandsons. I have 5. And I had to think about it. I have 5 grandchildren.
5 floods.
God bless. I know, amazing. 2 beautiful girls, and then we got these boys. Boy energy is very different. But that moment made me stop and think about what is my accountability as a grandmother. And there are 3 things that I do. The first one is to tell the family stories. The second one is to help in whatever way I can with their education. And the third is to teach them about the world.
Beautiful.
So last week, I was in the home. We are a divided family right now. Was in the home of a family, my daughter in Omaha, and I had to leave the house on Wednesday because I was so distraught. I had the choice I had to make is, do I cry here or do I cry in a private space? And how will my 10-year-old little darling Jack understand what Mimi is crying about? So I made the choice to leave. So what this has done for me, Terry, with you talking about how do we remake those stories and how do we talk about those stories, all afternoon I thought about what is the story that I have to tell? Because as a grandmother, I have an accountability to tell a story and to teach about the world in which we live. So somehow those 2 things have to walk together for me as a grandmother, and I will probably spend the whole drive back to Fort Collins, all 8.5 hours, thinking about what does that story leave? Because my daughter and I it wasn't a good parting. But as a grandmother, I have an accountability to walk in and hold that space. And I don't know how many other people in this room are feeling that feeling, but thank you, Terry, for this afternoon, because I have to reframe, I have to do something with the story here. Because that's an accountability I gave myself in Sky Mine Hall, God knows how many years ago. So thank you.
I'm going to share one story with you, and I don't know if I'll be able to get through this.
Let's just cry together.
But I am a grandmother, and it is my greatest calling. I have 2 grandchildren, Malka, she'll be 6 on Saturday, and Sheja, who is 5, and their parents are Rwandans. Louis is our adopted son, who is Rwandan, who survived the genocide. And I love these children so much. And they've had a tough time. And I'm not betraying confidences here. But I'm going to tell you a story because I think it's emblematic of what is being asked of us as grandmothers and aunties and mothers. And Malka, when this was last year, And she said, Tate Terry. They used to call me Tate Blanca, the white grandmother. And they now call me Tate Terry. But she said, instead of a nap, sleep nap, can we have a talk nap? And I said, what a good idea. And she said, Shasia can have a sleep nap, but you and I are going to have a talk nap in our own room. And I said, fair enough. And we went to have a talk nap, and I said, what's on your mind, Malka? And she said, do you think I'm ugly? And I said, Malka, you're the most beautiful girl I have ever seen. And she said, am I too black? And I said, Malka, you are beautiful. And she said, Dadi is light, Mami is light, Shaja's light. But, and I won't say, but she said, someone said, you're too black. And I said, you're so beautiful. And we got the computer out and looked at all of these beautiful, dark, black women. And then she said, you're white. And I said, I am. And she said, will you show me your body? And she said, will you take off your clothes and let me see your body? It was the most terrifying moment, may I just say. And I said, yes. And I took off all my clothes and stood before my granddaughter. And as I stood there, naked, in front of this child, she said, Tate Terry, what color is your heart? And I said, red. And she said, and what color is my heart? And she said, I already know, Tate Terry, our colors are the same heart, aren't they? And there was something in that moment, stripped naked, with a child saying, is our heart the same color? Even though our skins are not, even though I am being told I'm too black, where do we find that common soul moment? And I think about that all the time. And just after this afternoon, I called her and I said, Malka, I cannot wait to see you. And she goes, Tate Terry, it's 6 days. And I just think we have to allow ourselves as grandmothers to be seen, as terrifying as it is.
Yeah. Well, shall we take a breath together?
Sorry.
I wasn't going to go that far.
Okay, here we go.
Don't put any ideas in these wild women. I'm supposed to be moderating this thing. It's out of control already. Yikes. And this is a Buddhist place.
Nakedness is our sword.
Yikes. Last time I moderate for Upaya.
Not really.
Yikes. And somebody over here had a question. Yeah, let's go to this side.
Thank you all so much. I've really loved the conversation around story, and as a writer as well, I think a lot about story in my practice is also, and find for me that they're very interwoven. But I've been thinking, and this is kind of a puzzle both for craft and also practice, just reflecting on Roshi Glassman's, first guidance of, to enter into don't know mind, and then to bear witness, and then to step into awakened action. And I find writing is kind of a form of awakened action, and it can be. But to tell a story, you're not announcing, I suppose, but in a way that you are telling a story that you know. And so how do you tell a story from the space of don't know mind? And that's my question for all of you.
What a great question. And something I find a lot is people think that you have to know everything to write. And often, and I do nonfiction, people then start fictionalizing to fill in the blank spaces. And I think there's a way you can write about not knowing, write about what's missing, write about the profound unknowability of everybody else and maybe yourself, of the incompleteness of every picture. And I think the true and honest story is the one that says, we don't know exactly why he did that. We don't know exactly what happened to her. I don't know exactly why I could never bear to go back again. And then, and the same can be said for journalism, where it's been, back to that blasted election. It's been really annoying watching everybody come up with the election turned out the way it did because all voters are exactly like me and they didn't do exactly what I would have done, and other things. There's a lot of very weird, simplistic analyses out there. So I think you can, and I actually think it's a lot more interesting. And, Uncertainty's biggest fan, that it's so much wiser to know that you don't know than to pretend or convince yourself that you do. And seeing that filling in, often I think, it's not even real expert's mind and it's not beginner's mind, it's bullshit expert mind. So I actually think there's a lot of space for it. I also think poetry really gives a lot of permission. As a nonfiction writer, I read a lot of poetry because it's like, okay, I was writing about nightingales and now I'm writing about my grandmother's nightgown, and then we're going to go to Krakow, and then we're going to, that it refuses to be bound by the rules of logic. It refuses to explain everything. And one of the problems I have as a writer is the feeling that I have to explain everything. So I hope you can just give yourself an invitation to engage with mystery, uncertainty, unknowability. And I just think it's so interesting to write, I don't know what happened, here's what I imagine happened, but I truly don't know, versus that kind of bad history, bad memoir that just fills it all in with something gummy. So, thank you.
Thank you for the question. And I didn't get your name. Vanessa, thank you so much. Great question.
So you're also Virginia Woolf's favorite sister.
My brother's name was Quentin. My parents were literary.
We see. All right, so shall we go back to online? There are a number of raised hands, and some people have been waiting a long time. Wendy.
Yeah, Dami. I will unmute you. Here you go.
Oh, okay, I have it. Yes. Wow. When I raised my hand, the question was from the panel, what is alive in you? And since then, we've turned it into asking questions. So maybe I can do both. What's alive in me is the story, changing the story. Thank you so much for that. I'm in the middle of rewriting my family story and listening to Terry talk about it. And I had just thrown out trying to stay too close to the truth and let the story unfold. And Rebecca said, we don't know what we're going to write. And I certainly don't know what I'm going to write yet, but it will be revealed as I'm doing it. I know that much. But when Roshi talked about working in the prison and understanding, or at least seeing and experiencing, the incredible rage from people who were there. I worked 13 years in a male youth correctional facility as a mental health provider. I had to help them change their stories. And the stories that they told me and that I gathered were horrendous. They wouldn't have ended up in there. And the sad part is that most of them will continue with that story once they're released. And so my question is, can we actually, I can change the story for me. I understand why the election went this way. Because I've sat with them. I've heard the stories. I've seen, you know, the trauma that happens in the first 5 years of life determines everything for the rest of their life. And can we actually change that? People at the time would say, you know, we can change anything with love. You know, we can adopt children, we can foster children. You don't change it with love. The deep damage that's done in utero or that's done in the first 18 months of life will rear its ugly head. And then when we talk about Gaza and Israel, I was raised in Europe. I was very close to what all happened in those years because I was just post-war. So I heard the story. I wonder if it's just a big boomerang of what happened to the Jewish people, even though many of them are protesting it right now. But I'm wondering if just this big boil, you know, erupted.
So, Dem, could you rephrase your question?
Yes. Okay.
So really want to make sure we get that right.
Can we change the story for these people who've been so traumatized, kids, adults, whole nations, how can we change their story? Because they're living with it. Iraq, half of the people have lived only with violence, you know.
Thank you.
You know, our son, Louis, is writing his story now so that his children will know who he is because they had a tough separation. The parents are now divorced. And the other night he read me the end of his book, and it's so beautiful. Because it was one step, and suddenly he saw a larger pattern, and it was so moving. So I hear what you're saying, but I'm not sure. I think I respectfully disagree. I do think the stories can change.
Roshi, can I bring up Jarvis?
Yeah.
One of my really good friends, who some of you may know about, may have read, is Jarvis Masters, who's been on death row for almost 40 years, except death row no longer exists in California, but the death penalty does. And he has the classic, all the worst things that could possibly happen to you story, completely absent father, addict, sex worker, mother, severe neglect, severe abuse from the men who came around, severe abuse in foster care, and then punishment by the juvenile justice system for running away from the abuse. He's exact 8 months to the day younger than me. And so he was in when those systems were, I think, much more corrupt than they are now. I got kicked out of foster care and juvenile justice, with nothing, no resources. So one of his uncle's friends was like, "Hey kid, hold this gun while we do stick-ups." And he ended up in San Quentin, where he then got framed for participating in a murder. But our friend Melody Chavez was a death penalty investigator who was herself just launching into Buddhism at Berkeley Zen Center, a really engaged Buddhist center where our friend Alan Senaki is. And she was working on his case and just told him what her practice was. And Jarvis, who was full of rage, as Roshi was mentioning, as he should be, because, endless bad things had been done to him, and then he'd been framed in a way that made it clear that the criminal justice system they wanted a black man to be punished. They didn't really care which one. He sent away to a Tibetan organization.
Chagdud Tuku Rinpoche.
Do you want to say it louder?
Chagdud Tuku Rinpoche.
He took precepts from Rinpoche. He became a renowned Buddhist practitioner. He calls Pema Chodron Mom. He wrote a memoir everyone should read called That Bird Has My Wings. He's amazing. And he did this remarkable thing, which is to make spaciousness for himself from within the prison cell by building a big life outside the prison in the Buddhist community, and as a writer, as somebody who's rescued and changed lives, and somebody, I think, who developed a deep interior life. I think he was always a remarkable person, but he could have had Melody not shown up, had the next thing and the next thing happen. I think people are profoundly capable of change. I don't think we can change other people's stories. I think we can hand them invitations and equipment, as Melody did, and the people who came after her. And I had pretty profound trauma before I was 5. I've changed my story repeatedly as resources came along to rethink how do you do, and Buddhism was one of the stories that really helped me. How do you deal with this? How do you, what are the tools available? And so I think people can change, do change. I think we're in a system that creates tremendous harm. I think America breaks a lot of people, destroys a lot of people. But some people, sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's some remarkable force of character. Some people do change profoundly. And I've just been incredibly lucky to know Jarvis, who's also one of the funniest people I know. He calls me up collect because that's how it works. And then my job is to amuse him and talk about whatever we're here to talk about. We talk about serious stuff, but so I just wanted to bring Jarvis into the room.
And I want to mention Father Greg Boyle and Homeboy Industries. He teaches in our chaplaincy program, working with gang members in Los Angeles, where there are thousands of gang members in the LA area. And, providing a kind of straightforward joyfulness, but also a place where purpose is honored and it's real. And I just, his next book's coming out this week, by the way. I just want to kind of put a paren.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, we're
at 8:45.
We're at time or over time, and we really want to be stewards of your energy. This has been fun. Yeah, this has really been lovely. I am so grateful and really just appreciate the powerful questions, not fluffy questions at all, like really thought-provoking, soul-searching questions. And this incredible panel, but let folks have the last word up here. Anything you want to say?
Thank you.
Deep gratitude.
We'll see you in the morning at 7 a.m. with your magic, Valerie. Yeah. And we have a special, different schedule tomorrow, just FYI. So just to remind you. 7 o'clock, we'll be with Valerie. Thank you for these incredibly profound sessions. Breakfast at 8, it's a convivial breakfast, but don't talk too much because we'll meet in here at, is it 9:30? 9? Okay, then maybe don't talk at all. We'll meet here and we'll be, in concert and in consort from 9 until 11. Because some of you have to catch airplanes and so forth. So we have that schedule. And then, but also the food has been amazing. Ashley, oh my gosh, Laurel. I wish that all you online bodhisattvas could, every meal has been just beautiful. So we'll have a 12:30 lunch. I hope as many of you are going to be with us as possible. So then we can, and the faculty will be released from the faculty room. And Terry's actually offered to do writing practice with people, Rebecca. As has Rebecca. 12:30-ish after lunch, somewhere in there. So, the itinerary is going to be like this, but we've got this solid 2 hours of work that we need to do to complete what we're doing together.
We recognize that there were a number of people online who had their hands raised, and we saw you. And please bring your questions, your queries tomorrow, and we'd really love to get to them, and we want to hear what you have to say. And are so grateful for your energy and your participation.
We'll chant the 4 vows. Creations are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless, I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. Creations are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless, I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless, I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable, I vow to embody it. Let me respectfully remind you, life and death are of supreme importance. Time passes swiftly and opportunity is lost. Let us awaken. Awaken. Do not squander your life.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll bow to one another and then bow to the A new Buddha. We 2 days old.
Several centuries in 2 days.
Have a good rest.